Hello, my name is Heath Jones, and if you don't know already, I'm the pastor at Northwood Christian Church in Indianapolis, Indiana. And if you'd like to learn more about Northwood and of our involvement in our community and the different ministries that we have going on here, I encourage you to check out our website at www.indYncc.org. That's www.indncc.org. Or if you like, you can check us out and follow us on Facebook. Simply type in the name of our church, Northwood Christian Church, along with Indianapolis, so that you can find us. But for now, we're going to focus on a very short parable that Jesus tells in the 15th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. And we'll be reading first verses 1 through 3, and then we'll jump to verses 8 through 10. And it reads as follows. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling, saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. Or that woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one of them, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it. When she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I lost." Just so, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. As I said at the onset, this is a very short parable, and it's just one of 3 that Jesus tells, one right after the other. The one that came before was about the one sheep that strayed and the 99 that were left behind, and the shepherd that went after the one sheep, which is why this parable begins mid-sentence. It seems like it comes out of nowhere with the word "or." Well, it's because it comes right after that parable. And then the one that follows is the longer parable about the prodigal son. But these 3 parables were told immediately after Jesus has been criticized for eating with tax collectors and sinners. And in Luke's gospel, the phrase tax collectors and sinners serves as a kind of catch-all phrase to describe the riffraff and the morally compromised, and those who are more cognizant of piety and holy living might want to avoid. But Jesus not only brushed shoulders with the alleged morally deviant, he broke bread with them. He went to their homes, which is what we find him doing here. In fact, he spoke of them as if they were persons of honor. And he'd say crazy things like the last will be first and the first will be last. And in doing so, he strained the social fabric of his day, trying to include those who others had for so long excluded. In fact, sometimes it seemed to others as if he wanted to tear the very social fabric to pieces. But to explain his actions, Jesus, in this instance, tells 3 parables, each with different characters and situations, but each making a similar point. Something is lost, something that on the face of it may not be valued very highly by ordinary people. So as was the case in the previous parable, in case you read it, one sheep strays? Well, one might think, no matter, we've got 99 others, except the shepherd in that story leaves the 99 and searches for the one, which implies that there may be more to the lost sheep than meets the eye. In other words, that hapless sheep matters to the shepherd, and the shepherd stands in for God in the parable, implying that lost persons are worth God's time and effort. And considering that we all find ourselves lost at one time or another, this means that God finds us worthy of time, effort, and love, but also those others. Maybe we are one of the 99 who stay on our better days, and we have to grapple with the implications of what it might mean for the one that wanders to be worth our time. Well, this week's parable is shorter, and it basically makes the same point, but there is at least one notable difference. I don't know if you noticed, but the God character is portrayed by a woman. The woman is searching for the coin, and this is one of 4 parables that has a woman as the main character. And this may not make the main point any better, but it may just shake us a bit in regards to our God image. You probably already know that masculine pronouns and images are dominant, no doubt, in the Bible and in the history of the church. But here we find that Jesus was comfortable comparing God to a woman, and we should take notice and think about that, to put it perhaps mildly. At least not be threatened by the idea. Here in this parable, God, a woman, and the woman loses a coin. And how much was the coin worth? And that matters. If it's worth a very small amount, one wouldn't wonder why she left well enough alone. If it's just a small coin of insignificant value, then you should just forget about it. But if it's worth a small fortune, we'd move heaven and earth to find that coin. And it turns out the coin was worth 1 day's wages, something called a drachma. That's what this coin was called, a drachma. So not bad, but it depends on who you are. To some, it's a whole lot. It's the difference between paying the light bill or the lights off. But to others, it might not mean so much. More on that later. A story. At least once every 2 years, Kelly loses her engagement ring. And this has happened even in this past year. And it was very stressful. We spend the first half of the day assuring ourselves that it'll turn up very soon. And then we spend the ensuing 2 days telling ourselves that we will find it soon. But then as each passing hour goes by, we become less and less certain. And this last year when it happened, we spent hours searching outside in the cracks of our wooden back porch. We searched every corner of the house and every floor vent. And to cut a long story short, it was in the couch. But you know what it's like to turn the house upside down for a lost item. We can all relate to the woman in this story. Very relatable parable. This one of the lost coin. Lost keys, lost wallet, lost remote control, and depends on how valuable the object is, well, that will determine how much effort we put in. Every now and again, our daughter Josie, our eldest, loses her Bear Bear. Bear Bear is the very small white bear that she received in the mail from her Nana. And if I call Nana Grandma, she gets mad, so Nana, we'll go with that. And she received it as a gift for some forgotten occasion. I actually think it was Valentine's Day. And it would soon become our daughter's absolute most cherished and most beloved stuffed animal. And we all think it's hilarious because it only cost a couple of dollars in a dollar store. But this bear goes with her everywhere we go, each time we travel, each and every time she sleeps at her grandparents' house. She has to have it, and she cannot seem to sleep without it, which leads me to where I began. When Josie loses Bear Bear, we had better find it fast. The worst is when she wakes us up between 1 and 4 in the morning. And she hasn't done this recently, but she used to open our door through tears and plaintively tell the story, Bear Bear is lost. And this usually means that she went to sleep with the bear in tow, but had lost it in the covers, and finding it should be a simple matter of turning over a few pillows and the blankets. And often it is, but every now and again, Bear Bear seems to disappear in thin air. And at times this can lead to 20 minutes of hard looking, which may not seem like a long time, but at 3 a.m. it can seem like an eternity. And after about 40 seconds of this, I usually think to myself, I've had enough. I think to myself, I can't believe this is happening, and all over a stupid stuffed bear bought at a dollar store. But this week, I really owe my entire sermon, to a dime that I found on a bathroom floor. And I didn't lose it myself. It wasn't mine. Someone else lost it, and I stood there for a minute, washing my hands in the restroom, looking at the dime, wondering why it had not been picked up. It looked like it had been there for some time. And of course, the reason for it not being picked up was obvious. No one had picked up the dime because it had laid there on the filthy floor. And even looking at it closer, I concluded that it had probably laid there for some time. It was way off in the corner, out of the way where you wouldn't be quick to notice it. And it was mired by dirt and by grime. And I thought, the reason no one wants to pick up that coin, that lost coin, and why its original owner seems to have abandoned it, is because on an intuitive level, it seems as though it's not worth as much as it once was back when it was clean, back when it was new, back when it was in someone's pocket. And the guy who dropped it probably left it for that very reason, as did every other person who followed. And now I'm the most recent in a long line contemplating the dime, that worthless, dirty dime. Or was it worthless? I mean, just think about it for a moment. After all, a dime is a dime is a dime. It's worth the same 10 cents that any other dime is worth, and it's good in any other American place of commerce that any other dime found and in a pocket would be. The only difference between that dime on the bathroom and any other dime was that it was covered in filth. But at the end of the day, we forget that it contained as much worth as any other dime, and there's a lesson here. As I stared at the dime, I was reminded of the woman who, after being caught in adultery, was taken by religious leaders to Jesus so that he might speak judgment onto her. That story can be found in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, and the penalty for such a crime was death, and her accusers appeared more than ready to carry out her execution. There are always two ways of viewing a human person being judged by their community. There are many who, after learning of another's alleged transgressions, or after having observed their flaws or their shortcomings, determine that the person is somehow worth less than they once were. High value at birth, who could deny? All babies are precious, but then over time, we feel as though they lose value in our eyes. Just as many might devalue a dirty coin on a bathroom floor, many devalue the humanity of people whose sin is perceived as especially grievous, and the dirtier they are, the less they are worth. And this was the view of the religious authorities who were questioning Jesus' decision to eat with the sinners and tax collectors, who I remind you are stand-ins for just the dregs of society in his day. But Jesus had a different perspective. He saw things differently. Perhaps the problem is our perception. In fact, I'll just come out and say it. The problem is in our perception. As for my wife's engagement ring, I think that most would agree that it's actually valuable, and so you don't question our searching for it. And it actually is expensive in the ways that our society generally agrees upon. At least it is to us. After all, I spent a summer working and saving to buy it, third shifts in a factory that made clutch plates, dirty job, hot job. I stood in front of a machine that sometimes shot parts into the ceiling above me. A death trap if someone were standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I stood in front of ovens for night after night, bonding parts together to buy the best I could then afford. Of course, some might consider it pedestrian. After all, one woman's treasure can be another woman's trash. In the case of that woman's drachma, a day's wages, to some that's a lot, to some that's not so much. But to us, that engagement ring symbolizes more. It represents the hope we held for our marriage and still hold today, before we said our vows and after. And now it reminds us of those vows in every memory made. And my wife sees more in the ring than others can see, but who sees it correctly? And I have my opinion, but of course I'm biased. But back to my daughter's little bear, that little white bear bought at a dime store. That value, the value in that stuffed animal is entirely, completely in the eye of the beholder. When I'm searching for it in the wee hours of the morning, it doesn't matter much to me, but it matters to my 9-year-old. And she sees more in the fabric and the stuffing and the stains that are now on it than I certainly do. It's her treasure, in fact. But who's right? Who's right about the bear? What is it really worth, and who can say? I think the one who loves it most sees it more, and probably sees it more rightly. Maybe not always in regards to stuffed animals, but almost certainly in regards to people, which is why Jesus' perspective and his teaching in this parable is so important. And so I picked up that dime. It was practically stuck to the floor. I took it, to the sink. I scrubbed it, I disinfected it, and then washed my hands very well. But eventually the dime regained its luster, its shine, and in doing so, I did not add to its value one bit, not 1 cent. Its worth was inherent in it the entire time. I merely noticed the lost beauty that lay just underneath and called it forth. And it is the same with us. No matter what we've done, our hidden worth is always real and obvious to God and those that know us through and through. I left the bathroom with that dime, and I took the hand of my daughter, and on the way out, she wanted a piece of gum from the gumball machine on the way out of the store. And it cost, guess what? 1 dime. Providential. I didn't even have one before. Now I do. And I used that dime, that allegedly worthless dime, now valued 10 cents. Recently lost, now found, and put it in my daughter's precious hand, and she gave it her blessing in a way as she put it in the slot machine and got out a gumball and placed the gum in her mouth, laughed out loud, and skipped on ahead of me. That dime gave her 5 minutes of joy, more joy than perhaps I've felt in a long time. And this is not to say that I don't feel joy, but to see my children feel the joy more keenly than adults often do. Oh, what is a dime worth? 10 cents doesn't even begin to describe it. Value is in the eye of the beholder, and in our case, in the eyes of our Maker. And it's possible that you are someone who has trouble believing that even the worst of sinners are precious in God's sight, and it might be that you throw stones at sinners in your own way, whether by thought, words, or deeds. And if this is true of you, then repent along with that newly found coin. After all, the heart of God is revealed by this parable, and if we are God's own, we must have God's heart. We must be people of grace who find value and worth in those who our broken world has deemed as irredeemable. We must never write people off as broken beyond repair or wholly given to evil. Jesus ate with tax collectors and sinners to teach us what he knew of the value hidden from everyone else in those people. And what's more, we must join with the woman in the searching for those who are lost, to find them on purpose and to become a part of their restoration story. But it's also possible that you have forgotten your own sense of worth. As a pastor, I run into people all of the time who feel that they are so damaged that they are beyond recovery. These people I meet along the way believe that the image of God in which they were made is tarnished beyond repair, like a dime cast aside, stuck to the floor, that they are less worthy of God's love. And unfortunately, there is no shortage of religious people anxious to cast stones, to ignore those of us who feel about as worthy as a dirty dime. I want you to know, I want me to know on my worst days, that God sees you through and through. God knows that you are worth saving and has sought you since you were born. She isn't about to stop anytime soon. It doesn't matter what you've done. There is grace enough for you, and then some. So stand and feel your worth. Be made clean by the grace and love of Jesus, and you will begin to know yourself. The beauty and love that lies hidden in you will shine through, and you will see yourself as you are. We've all been like that dirty dime, but the value was always there. In fact, it is still there, just the same.